2, 3. Hey guys, what's up? In this video, I'm going to show you how to install SAP Fiori toolset for SAP Fiori development. Now, SAP had recently decommissioned WebID full stack along with the WebID personal edition. So there is no choice but to use Business Application Studio, which is only available in a cloud as a subscription, service as a subscription. But if you want to develop something locally, and let's say you are a developer and you are learning on your own, so getting Business Application Studio subscription is not an option, even though they have a trial version where you could register for a free version and you could try. But there's an alternative, which is a Visual Studio Code. Basically, the Business Application Studio is using most of the extensions from Visual Studio Code. So they are identical in a sense. This is a desktop tool, and the Business Application Studio is on cloud tool. So I'm going to show you how to set up, how to build, and how to deploy an application using Visual Studio Code. So before I start, as you can see, on my desktop, I'm using Linux for my development, because I prefer that. It's my choice of operating system, and it's a lot flexible than using Windows. And if you are a SAP developer and if you are seeing my Linux first time, I would highly encourage you to start using Linux as a primary development workstation, because it's fast, it's effective, you don't need a lot of maintenance. And SAP had moved away from SAP GUI. The more and more SAP is putting emphasis on web-based technologies. So the toolset is not really now operating specific. It's really operating agnostic. We could use it in Linux, Mac, or Windows. So if you're if you're new, you want to get started, I would recommend to start with something a leaner distribution like a Pop OS, which is fairly straightforward. It's easy to maintain, and it's fully GUI, so you don't have to write a single command. It takes just 5 minutes to install. So enough about Linux. Let's get moving ahead with the installation of SAP Fiori elements for Visual Studio Code. So first of all, I have already installed Visual Studio Code, which you can install it from Microsoft repository. It's freely available. Once you have Visual Studio Code, we need to install a few extensions. But before even going there is a prerequisite required for these extensions, which is a Node.js. Node.js is a Java compiler, a JavaScript compiler, or it's a JavaScript engine, which supports a few toolsets in Visual Studio Code. So let's do that first thing. We will install Node.js in my system. I don't have right now, so I'm just going to install. By the way, this is Arch Linux, so I will be using package manager, Pacman as a package manager. But if you are on other distributions, let's say Ubuntu or Fedora, you would be referring the package distribution, their package distribution. So in Ubuntu, it's apt, and in Fedora, it's DNF or YAM, based on what version you are using. So the command is simple. We want to install Node.js, and Node.js has its own package manager called npm, which is a Node package manager. So we will be installing both of these by running pacman -s Node.js and npm. I'll enter my password. We'll ask permission to install these things. I'll say yes. Now, once we have Node.js, we can confirm that by running node-v. So our version is 16.4.2, which is fairly recent version. And this version has a compatibility with the SAP Fiori tools. So now we have a node and an npm. Now the second prerequisite is we need one of the npm module as a prerequisite to generate applications, which is a Yeoman generator. So I'm going to say npm install Yeoman generator. So these are the only two prerequisites. First, we need Node.js. Second, we need Yeoman generator from NPM. And Node.js is a prerequisite for NPM. So that's why we need Node.js. Now we have both the tools installed. We are good with the, we met the prerequisites. Now let's go back to Visual Studio Code, and we'll select the extension option here. And then we'll search for SAP extension, Fiori extension. So somewhere here it says SAP Fiori tools extension pack. Now the difference between the tool, the extensions and extension pack is it's a group of packages or a group of extensions. So these are the extensions we need for Fiori tools. So rather installing them one by one, we just select one group, which is extension pack, and we install this. So once we install this, it's going to install all the applications under this extension pack. The question is whether to use root or use your own user without root privileges. So I would prefer to have in my home location, so I don't need to use root privileges. Okay, so our extension pack extensions are installed, where when it shows overall status as disabled and uninstalled, that means everything is installed. So we are good. Now we have our SAP Fiori tools, whatever tools we need. And in brief, these tools are used for, like, for example, SAP Fiori tool application generator. This gives us application wizard to create applications. This is a guided development. Again, it will give you support when you create artifacts. Service modeler. So if you want to navigate from your metadata to annotations, service modeler extension is used. XML annotations. So in the Web IDE or Web IDE full stack, there was a dedicated option to modify annotations in a GUI. Now that option is not there anymore, since tool is not there anymore. But in VS Code, there is a new tool, XML annotation modeler, which is not exactly looks like or UI. It doesn't really look like what used to be in Web IDE. It's a different tool now. It's more of auto completion based than the graphical UI. So that's the another extension. Then application wizard. This is again generating applications, and XML toolkit to format XML and to view it properly, reindent. So to use as a reindent. Okay, so we have our extensions now. And after the installation, we can see there are release notes, which basically highlights the last release features. So once we have our tool and once we install other prerequisite, when we met prerequisite, now all it needs is to use the tool. So let's create an application, a list report application, which is fairly easy, and then we'll try to deploy that on a local system. Now, in my test case, I'm using SAP Developer Edition Docker container for ABAP 1909. And if you want to install yourself, I will leave a link in the top here. You can refer my video for installing ABAP 1909 as a Docker container. So let's get started now. To call the command palette, the shortcut is Ctrl+Shift+P, which brings the command palette, and from here we'll say Fiori open application generator. So select that. Now when we run first time, system will try to install templates, and these are the templates which we will use for generating applications. And SAP Fiori had provided 4 templates, basically a list view, overview, analytics, and a work list. So we'll use the report template, list report object page template. So I selected that. Now next, here we need to specify the source. In our case, it's a on-prem SAP system, which is a SAP ABAP 1909 Docker container. I don't have, it's a first time, so new system, on-prem, because I'm hosting that. Next thing is I need to supply the URL, which is ABAP 1909 .jam.io, and the port is 50,000. So as soon as it recognizes that this is a valid URL, it will show more options. Client, which is 001, and since it's a developer system, so I will be using my developer user ID and a password. Enter. Okay, so it seems it did not authenticate. Perhaps my password is not good. ABAP 1909 is good. Is it really my password? Okay, it was a wrong password. Now the next thing is, since we are generating a list report, so we need to select a OData service. And well, I did not prepare anything, so I'm just gonna pick one standard OData service in a developer edition. So I will pick the sales order. Next. Now we can select a main entity based on your service. In my case, I'm just going to select addresses and navigation entity to country. Next. And let's name the project as demo project. Application title, demo project. Namespace, I'm just going to leave it as is. Again, we'll say demo project. The project path. And this is where the folder will be created and the application will be stored. So I will leave it as is. Deployment configuration. So if you're planning on to deploy directly from your VS Code to ABAP system, then you can choose this option, and then system, the application wizard will ask you to enter more details, and you don't have to manually download and upload. You also have option to add it to a launchpad. So you have to enter the semantics and action, and the advanced option has few more configurations. Like if you want to select a specific UI5 version, you will be able to do that, along with if you want to change UI5 theme. So the UI5 version, I'm just going to leave it as latest, so I'm not going to say yes. No would be fine, so continue. Now it will ask for the deployment configuration. Since I am deploying it on a on-prem SAP system, so I have to adhere to the namespace, which is Z or Y. Package, I will be using temporary package, so that would be $temp. But if you're planning on to deploy in a production like a system, then you should be using your own package along with the transport number. And then also you have a choice to put a deployment description. I'm just going to leave it empty. This is semantic objects for Fiori Launchpad configuration. I'm just going to say Z demo project, action display, title, demo project, and finish. So here you can see the project is being built right now using Node.js and Yeoman generator. Once the project is built, it will be added into your workspace. You can have more than one project per workspace. So it says, do you want to trust the author? Yes. I'll close the generator. And now here you can see my project is built, which has a specific structure, which is a standard structure. So we'll have VS Code as the settings, project specific settings. Node modules, so whatever modules we need, Node.js modules, those will be installed here. Web app will have pretty much whatever functionality, whatever we do in app is under Node, under web app. Then package.json is all again to keep a track of Node modules. These three YAML files, UI5 YAML, UI5 local, and deploy is for running local through proxy or to deploy it on a target system. And they have their own settings, like what is my destination system, what UI5 URL I will be using. If you are using your target system on a different UI5 version, then you can supply URL here instead of using UI5 SAP. Then this is the proxy, OData source, and deploy is basically to maintain the target system where we will be deploying this application. So now our project is ready, but how do we test? Do we need to deploy on the system to test? No, we don't have to. All we have to do is say npm start here, and it will open a browser, and then it will connect to our backend system, and it will fetch the OData service and whatever we need. So we built an application. We picked the address entity. So if I go here, select all and go, should list all the addresses. Since it's a list report object page, it brings you to on an object page, but since we don't have anything enabled here, it will not show. You need to update annotation modeler, or you need to add in annotation modeler to get all the objects from the header entity, all these on the object page. Maybe that's another video. So in 5 minutes, not only we install the Fiori development tools, but we created a full-fledged application which can be used as a list report. So we just saw the part where we can test the application. But how about if I want to deploy an application? Now there are 2 steps to deploy. First, this application is built but is not generated or is not ready to be deployed in the system because this is not compressed, it's not optimized. So for that we have to run npm run build. What this does is it creates a dest folder in the project. This wasn't there before. Once you run a command, this will create a dest folder, and in this folder we have everything required to deploy. Basically, it creates 2 versions of application, one for debug and another purely for optimized version to run. So whenever we want to debug, we can pass SAP UI debug parameter, and then it will load the debug version. But if we don't, then it runs the regular version, and the difference between these 2 is this is more compressed or minified version. Along with that, it also creates a preload file. Now, SAP Fiori applications can be deployed as a single file, as a single preload file. What this preload file is it's a compressed version of all the files in the project. So the idea is if we have, let's say, 10 files or 10 controllers or views to load, there will be a latency for each file whenever we open application. So that gets 10 times because we have 10 files. So instead doing that, the preload file combines everything into a single file. You deploy, so the latency is now for 1 instead being 10. So that's the use of preload, and we don't have to do it manually. You just run a build, and then the system is going to build automatically. So if you want to manually deploy this application, let's say for whatever reason, you could take this dest folder and you just upload it in your SAP ABAP system, and you're good to go. But since we are using deployment configurations in our tool using VS Studio Code, so I'm not going to do it manually. So rather I would do npm run deploy. Now this may work or this may not, might not, because I did not verify if I have my service active on a backend. Please maintain correct credentials to avoid seeing error. Deploy to ABAP, see npm environment variables, running task to deploy. Okay, so it's asking for username and a password, which obviously I cannot enter it now. It's already past that stage, but it's pretty simple. Let me check why. So deploy, it says yes. Okay, username, developer, password. Hopefully it's not going to show on the console. Okay, deployment failed. No service found for namespace UF5, name ABAP repository service version 0001, gateway error. So it seems I did not activate a service as the ABAP service, all the ABAP services required to deploy. But it's fairly easy. You just run deploy, and then you'll be able to deploy application directly on your on-prem ABAP system. So that's all I wanted to show you in this video. Maybe in the next video I will record more detailed version where we can modify entities and build a project and deploy in the system, and maybe I'll get rid of that error which we saw. Okay, thank you for watching.